really help provide you next level protection from unwanted bots, automation, and fraudsters. And providing hopefully a lot of good takeaways of how you can help up your game in the very complicated world that we live in around cyber threats. I'm just going to start off here. Who remembers vacations? Certainly COVID has helped accelerate a lot of things, a lot of work from home, but an explosion in e-commerce and online retail business, which has driven a corresponding increase in the attack surface of your web and mobile front doors, really, and entry points that you offer for your customers. How many of you, while on vacation, have often had to step out and take care of something back at the office in many cases? Really not sure, whether you're truly on vacation or not. Are you tired of playing whack-a-mole or constantly tweaking and updating the protections that you have in place? And because of COVID-19 and all the associated things associated with it, people are looking around. They have options now. They're more likely to look elsewhere, perhaps, for jobs. So you're often struggling to do more with less. And we're really here to help you today to show how we can help be an enabler, really help you be better at your job, continue to be the champion that you've been to date, but even more so, providing you the ability to stand behind an outcome of providing increased protection without the drawback of increasing user or customer friction. Now, before we get going, just something to call out here quickly is that we have to talk a little bit about how we got to the place we're at in InfoSec today. This is the busiest slide. I don't really have a better way to organize it, but if we think about how InfoSec has grown over the last 30 or 40 years, we've often sort of taken this model of how a network connection is made, and we're focusing on different aspects of that traffic. We're definitely, looking historically at blocking bad actors at a firewall or something at an IP address level. And as we move up the stack, we're getting more and more intelligence, or hopefully more intelligence, about sort of what's coming at you from an IDS or IPS or a WAF perspective, of machine data as well, augmenting that from logging and telemetry, all feeding into centralized repositories like SIM tools. Now, what's interesting here is that we've used this approach to try and make business decisions, some to benefit of the business, but in many cases, not really the outcome that we were hoping for. And the reason is that we've just ingrained this model in how we organize ourselves within an org structure, how we look for talent to acquire when we're looking to expand our team, how we divide responsibility within the team, within the various domains of expertise within that InfoSec sort of Venn diagram, what products we buy, how we implement them, where we deploy them, how we engage with external teams or even internal teams in the information that we share or can share between each other. It's very different. And yet, where are we today? Many vendors, of course, will have opinions, but are we really better off than where we were before, even with all the visibility that we have? We have a lot of solutions today providing visibility all the way up to layer 7. But the problem with that is, everything is becoming increasingly encrypted end to end. You may not be able to see inside the packets. But the reality is that the packets themselves are probably not really where you need to be looking. In 2020, almost half of all publicly disclosed breaches in North America were a result of automation. Automation targeting the login of your web and mobile application that is used to access your customers' accounts through unauthorized means. It's important to note that I'm not talking about exploiting a vulnerability in your web application or in your hosting infrastructure. I'm talking about bad actors leveraging tools to use your website or your mobile application as designed, but with malicious intent. And that's really sort of where the landscape of security finds itself today, is at this crossroads of organizational silos still being present in many cases in organizations. If you're in the security silo, you're very often, as you know, day to day, sort of living that infosec sort of nightmare where you have a very, let's call it, lower level signal to noise ratio. Quality of signals is very low. There's often not a ton of information to go on to make a decision, and yet you're often pressured to make that decision without impacting real users and upsetting maybe the digital or the marketing team. At the same time, the digital and marketing team often aren't really consulting you on any changes that they're making to the website, which might increase the security footprint through third-party, unreliable, untrusted, unverified libraries or the next new thing. And then in the middle, you have the risk or the fraud teams, which are really at odds between both organizations. They're trying to provide protection against unwanted fraudulent purchase of goods or theft of financial instruments or loyalty points even. So you're really sort of stretched, as we can imagine, of solving all three of these different bucket areas with a single platform. And the bad guys just simply walk through. They will test the various controls put in place within the fraud teaming and within the security apparatus. Many of the solutions deployed today are predicated on rules, and rules are easy to be tested by a bad actor. And in many cases, those rules can be easily circumvented. And so from a fraud perspective, they'll just try out a bunch of different things, usually by human actors. So again, if you're using machine data or wire data at IP addresses and timestamps and user agent strings without really knowing if it's actually a human or not, it can be very hard to discern real from fake. And that's really where we are at today. A pretty bold statement is that the security controls that are in place aren't particularly effective for the modern business problems we're trying to solve. This is a New York Times article just last week talking about the difficulty it is to get shoes. Sort of a strange topic to talk about here, but it's a real pervasive problem. There are a lot of avenues in this COVID-19 world we live in with supply chain constraints that are making goods that were previously easy to get very difficult to get your hands on. And the reason for that is because in many cases, these particular organizations don't have the right tooling in place at the front door and simply don't know the reality of what they're being faced with. So this is an example dashboard of one of Shape's customers. It's not Nike, just want to make that clear. But this is a dashboard of their web e-commerce traffic that's actually sitting behind one of our competitors. 99.8% of the traffic is the yellow here. It's automation. You can't even see the human traffic, which is the little green line at the bottom. There's a tiny little blip here in green that corresponds with this massive increase here in yellow. And that massive increase is the drop of a brand new set of shoes occurring on the site. And so this is sort of with the right tooling in place, you can get unique insights about the humans visiting your site, but also about things that perhaps other tools are missing. And it's a hard problem, right? There's a lot of vendors. It's hard to know which one is which. Gartner reports and such are great, but they only get so far in that pay-to-play way that they work. And there's a lot of different fraud vendors on the marketplace and different anti-bot product in the marketplace. And it's really hard to know what to look for and how to consume what they're providing. And the reality is that, unfortunately, a lot of easily obtainable and rather very simplistic tools exist to bypass most of the controls on the marketplace today. The reason for that is a lot of the tooling that's currently in place, as well as the tooling provided by a lot of other solutions on the market, are still stuck in that InfoSec 40-year-old thinking about IP addresses and thinking about timestamps and whether you're on a VPN or not. There's so much more data that can be gleaned with the right solution in place that lets you identify whether it's actually a human and whether that human has malicious intent or not. So this is just a quick zoom in here, again, from the previous slide, showing those 4 specific products that were being offered on that particular time. And we see that automation is generating 44 million transactions, completely outpacing the humans attempting to get these particular products. Now, it's not just an issue with shoes, of course. If you've tried to get an Xbox or a PlayStation 5 or a graphics card, obviously I'm skewing towards the technical, it's been almost impossible. Supply chain certainly doesn't help, but it's the bots and the automation that are really the reason why those solutions aren't generally available to the public. Now, by vertical, this problem set obviously is very different. In banking and financial services, because banking and financial services have traditionally spent billions of dollars every year on securing the front door, it's not that they're less of a target, but they're less of an opportunistic target versus, say, the retail sector or the telecommunications sector. And so we see time and time again in our customer base, especially when we come in brand new to an environment we have never been part of, we can see automation spiking like we pictured before. 99% of the traffic is not actually human that's visiting your particular online web or mobile application. This has far-reaching effects through teams like marketing. Is the metric data that they're using to justify the spend of this particular project or initiative, is it based on human data or is it based on bots? And how can you be sure? And so this is really where Shape stands apart from everything else in the industry. We are able to provide you an outcome. We provide outcomes of protection against automation by removing 99% of the noise and leaving you with just the human transaction data with effectively no false positives. From a fraud perspective, we have a unique approach that, again, leverages the unique human signal data set that we're capturing, and we're able to deliver 200 to 500% reduction in fraud occurring online through traditional avenues that commercial fraud tooling is deployed alongside. So things like money transfers or e-commerce fraud. We can do this all without increasing customer friction. So there's no CAPTCHAs to solve, no puzzles to draw a square around a sailboat, and it fits well within your cloud or digital transformation plans. We are deployment agnostic, if you will. So we're certainly, as Shape, we were acquired by F5. So we can obviously very easily integrate with an F5 big IP integration, but we can also just as easily integrate with any CDN player, any application delivery controller, anywhere in the cloud, whether it be AWS, GCP, or Azure. And we can provide to you, as a business champion enabler, we can provide a business outcome in terms of reduced cost and increased revenue simply by having the right tool deployed at the front door. And so what we're providing at Shape is we're providing a platform. That platform has 3 pillars, if you will, that roughly map to the silos I talked about earlier. Are you bot or not? Is the first, and where we cut our teeth was in Shape Enterprise Defense. We have a white glove, fully customizable managed service, but we also have a more downstream small, medium business consumable product called Silverline Shape Defense. And also coming out a little bit down the road, very short term, we're also coming out with a more even more simplistic API-based decisioning engine, where you simply make a request and we give you back a bot or not answer. So that helps you answer the "are you human or are you a bot" question. And then once you've eliminated all the bot traffic, and there is often a lot of it, we can now pivot on to looking at the remainder of the traffic, which is the human data. And we can start looking in the human transactions for evidence of human fraudsters operating at scale. So we can do this using machine learning and using a ground source of truth. For example, if you were to provide us with a set of known confirmed fraudulent transactions while we're deployed on your site, we can then use that to train a customized machine learning model in order to derive the outcome that we said before, 2 to 5 times more fraud detected with the same low false positive rates you're used to today with your existing tools. And on the flip side of the fraud coin, we have another product offering that is trying to give you the Amazon experience to any web or mobile transaction, effectively keeping you always logged in or removing the friction of having to log in by simply giving a signal to your identity and access management platform. So how do we do this? And this is really what's unique about our platform that sets us apart from the other vendors in the marketplace. The security industry has talked for years about zero trust, meaning you can't trust the client that's connecting to your infrastructure as being good. You have to treat them with suspicion the whole time. This is where Shape started 8 years ago. This is really fundamental to what we're doing. Every time we see a new connection come into a site that we're protecting, we're putting transparent challenges into that connection to make sure that that device or that session is authentic and they're not lying about who they are. And we do that in a way that leverages advanced virtualization techniques so that what we're looking for and how we're looking for it isn't obvious to a bad actor or someone trying to reverse engineer our solution. So when we're present on a web or mobile application, we're collecting data in 3 buckets. The first bucket is the device or the environment that the connection is coming from. So we analyze these particular aspects of the environment and we try and answer a very simple question. Are you authentic? Is it a real device? Is that environment true to what it claims to be when it first connects to us? Or are there some tells that there's something fishy and they're lying about what they are? And we do that in a way that's completely transparent. There's nothing popping up to the user. There's no Turing test for the user to solve, such as those captchas that you see where you have to pick the stop signs or the sailboats. None of that with Shape. The second bucket is we're looking at the behavior. What is the user doing when they're interacting with your web or mobile application? Are they typing faster than a human can type? Are they clicking in the same place every transaction? Has the user information maybe been previously recorded and replayed over thousands of transactions to try and bypass some of the more simplistic tools? And then everyone has access to the network level data, the headers of the transactions and the low level network information. And so what we can do with that, and this is really where we're leaders in the fraud space and in the anti-automation space, is we're providing an attestation in a zero trust model that that device or that environment is genuine. If you claim to be an iPhone 13, we will be able to prove whether or not that's true. And why this is important is bad actors lie about the devices they're coming from or where they're coming from all the time. And they do that to bypass the more simplistic controls. Things like IP address-based limits or reputation-based databases or signature databases or fingerprint databases. As a bad actor, I can just randomize a bunch of signals. That doesn't work with Shape. If you claim to be Windows 10 device running Chrome 92, we will issue some transparent challenges, such as rendering an emoji off screen, to prove whether or not you're actually the device you claim to be. Bad actors lie about where they're coming from all the time. Good users never do. And so what this looks like now, we're looking at a different user's traffic, but their previous tool thought that automated traffic comprised 1 to 3% of all of their traffic. So 1 to 3% of the traffic is automated. Unfortunately, that tool wasn't giving them the full picture. It was close to 90% automation. This is the login portal to a large North American telecommunications provider. Now, why would you want to attack the login page of a telco? Interesting question. If you're a bad actor, if I can take over your account, I can port your phone number over to me. If I could also figure out your banking login information, I can take your money, or I can transfer your Bitcoin or your Ethereum. So telcos are being targeted for the personally identifiable information that is then used downstream, or to conduct fraud in terms of number porting or SIM swap, so that I can take over your account at a third party. Or maybe you're using the email platform provided by your telecommunications provider, and they share a similar login and password. And that can have very devastating consequences. Right? And so what we see here is we first went in online on web, and what we see is yellow traffic. So that's when we first go in an environment, we're in monitor only mode. We're just collecting our telemetry data and reporting back what we find. The green traffic is the actual human transactions. If you're graphing your web traffic today, which I highly suggest that you do, you should see a nice diurnal pattern that looks exactly like this. Human traffic obviously spikes during the day and then ebbs at night. Weekends are clearly less traffic in general than weekdays. And if you're not seeing that, if you're graphing your traffic and it looks spiky like this, that's a good indicator that you have an automation problem present. Now, it took us a couple weeks. Normally, the customers are not necessarily gung-ho on jumping in right away because they're worried about false positives or false negatives. And so we certainly want to be in monitoring mode for the span of a couple weeks. And that's what we did. We conduct a false positive analysis, and anything that pops up, like really old browsers, people running on Windows ME machines, really old versions of Internet Explorer, for example, we can make the odd exception here and there, but for the most part, we have the lowest false positives among the industry, and we have the deployment base, which I'll talk about a little later, to prove that out on. So we went into mitigation on September 1st. This was last year. And what we saw here is the bad actors within 3 days pivoted to the mobile API now. So they're trying to log in on the web, and then it took them 3 days to move over to the mobile app. So this is really a testament that if you're going to provide protection in one place, you need a solution that provides protection everywhere. And that's going to be evident as more and more traffic drives online to mobile. You really need a solution that's able to take advantage of web and mobile protections in the way that we certainly can. So what we're going to see, however, is, is like, well, I have a WAF and I have an IP reputation list. Isn't it going to provide protection? And unfortunately, the answer is no. Anything that's using IP address or signatures is generally going to be very limited to rate-based controls, which are not going to be very effective. We need higher order signals of what is the user doing, how they're interacting with your particular application. We really need the human element added to the data such that we can provide the outcome that we deliver. And that's exactly what we provide. And that's what I mentioned before. So we are, first and foremost, with our Shape Enterprise Defense product, we are a managed service. We are solving this problem for you. You do not need to interact with us. You will get your weekends and your vacation back. This by far is probably one of the most appealing aspects of our solution. We sort of have a soft promise that we will remove 99% of unwanted automation. And that's delivered across all of our customer base, which we'll see shortly where we're deployed. And that's in real time. So we're able to make a decision in less than 5 milliseconds most of the time. and provide protection against web and mobile entry points. So again, we're not talking about compromises or vulnerabilities. We're talking about bad actors using bots or automated tools to try and log in or to try and buy something off your website very quickly, to get the human element out and win that particular battle. We can do this in a way that does not introduce customer friction. No CAPTCHAs. CAPTCHAs are not an effective deterrent at all. 36% of humans fail the CAPTCHA the first time, so it's a friction. We call it a human friction event. No one likes doing the CAPTCHA of pick the stop sign. They're also not effective because there are CAPTCHA solving services. I can pay a plethora of third parties $1 and get 1,000 CAPTCHAs sold by a human, solved by a human in a third world country. And we have anti-CAPTCHA capabilities baked right into a number of attack tools like Sentry MBA or OpenBullet. And so there's really no good reason to put CAPTCHA in. A lot of the competitors put CAPTCHA in because they don't collect the high order, highly intelligent signals and the advanced signals that we do about the human element of what they're doing. And finally, we can fit, as I mentioned before, into any cloud or hybrid cloud or even a fully on-premise deployment. We really just need some way of layer 7 routing traffic through our reverse proxy service. And so what do you get with Shape, with our bot protection, is you get that outcome of mean green human traffic. So now this is that same customer I showed a few slides ago, that telecommunications login. Now of note, they were seeing about 1,000 accounts compromised per week at $200 to $250 per account. So their credential stuffing problem was costing them millions of dollars a year. And the Shape managed service is saving them those millions of dollars a year so they can focus their efforts and their money elsewhere. We've also had the unintended benefit of reducing the amount of load and the cost of their AWS hosted website infrastructure. We've reduced that by 600%. So their cost and the performance of their website, the cost went down of hosting it and the performance improved because we're removing so much automation from hitting the front door. Now, where are we deployed? Obviously, we can't talk about most of our customers, but we are in 60 to 75% of the North American consumer banking industry. We are in the majority of hotel and transportation industries, large retail, and we are very recently on the largest social media platform with over 1.5 billion monthly active users using our mobile application, our mobile SDK. So we are by far the leader in providing anti-automation that is really orders of magnitude better and years ahead of anyone else on the market. Now, don't take our word for it. This is the sentiment of someone who writes bots for a living coming after a property we've just recently protected. And the sentiment here is that you can certainly spend your time and money trying other solutions. You're going to have mixed results. Only Shape can provide the protection that the bad actors are concerned about and haven't yet meaningfully bypassed in any meaningful way. So I'm going to pause here. I see there's some questions in the Q&A.
Yeah, they're definitely, Jason, first and foremost, it's enlightening and a little scary how quickly they adapted after you guys deployed in that telco to taking another avenue. So, I mean, some food for thought. Yeah, just we had a couple of questions. I want to go through them in order just to make sure that they were addressed. The first was Amarpreet Nanda, who is with an executive director with Morgan Stanley. He talked a little bit about maybe distinguishing between Akamai and Shape.
Sure.
IP ranges and going into a little more detail. I know you covered it briefly with some of the other competitive technologies,
Sure.
but maybe a bit more deep.
Sure. Akamai tried to buy Shape unsuccessfully 4 times. Let's just put that out there. They love to be fast followers. So Akamai now claims to offer a managed service, which we've always had since day one. And They've now started doing some basic JavaScript obfuscation and are starting to do some of the little signal collection that we've been using for years. And we have hundreds of things ready to go behind the scenes that we haven't filed patents for because we don't want to issue them. Let me just say this. Akamai is probably the world's most widely deployed bot solution. If it was particularly effective, we'd all have an Xbox or a PlayStation or the latest shoes. Nike has both Akamai and Kasara deployed on their website. Let's just say that. Nike is called out in that New York Times article. So the solutions aren't particularly nearly as effective as Shape. The final thing on Akamai is they have the same protection on all their customers. So if you are a customer of theirs and their JavaScript has been bypassed in one place, it bypasses everybody. Our solution is unique. We are generating unique challenge per client request per customer. We fine-tune that, and that engine is powered behind the scenes. There's really no need for us to configure anything. That's just how it's been built from the ground up to be very robust, nearly irreversible, and again, that zero client trust mandate behind the scenes to deliver the outcome that we can.
Well said. No, we appreciate that. And John Jeffries, actually, that's a nice segue into John's question. He discusses registered bots and do they collect personal information? And if yes, how can I be sure that the data is safe and secure? What about privacy?
Sure. So with our solution, we don't collect any PII unless there's a certain need to. But generally, if we're collecting anything, we're collecting it in an irreversible hashed reason. So collecting PII isn't required for our solution's effectiveness, but we do like to provide periodic threat briefings. And so we might look to collect some sort of hash version of a username, for example. So we don't know what the username is, but we can tell how many times that username was attempted and from where. And so we can get into some really high level, really interesting metrics that we can provide you and the business as to the number of unique users logging in from the same device, more from a fraud perspective. That's certainly very interesting. And it provides some higher order level of information as well with our Shape Recognize tool to show you how many users are struggling with the login process, not the bots, but the humans. So every transaction that Shape is part of, there's over 1,000 different data elements collected per transaction. A lot of them are proprietary signals, and for the most part are just binary zeros and ones of whether things are there or not. But there's a ton of information. We collect 400 user interaction events without collecting PII. So we're just looking at how the particular interaction is occurring and if there's weird things being done as part of it.
Okay, no, great. Thank you for that. And hopefully, John, that covered off what you were looking for from Jason there. Another question here from John as well, actually, which was one of the ones that I was going to bring up. But could you go in a bit more detail about how the services deals with false positives and false negatives? I know you touched on it a slide or two ago, but if we could go a bit into that, that would be great.
Yeah. So our solution, like almost all others, relies on JavaScript to execute. And so if you have JavaScript executing in your environment, there's a pretty good chance that you're real to start with. But if there's anything that's wrong, so we're not looking at totality of, like, say, a single signal. So I'm just going to back up here. As I mentioned, with each transaction, there's over 1,000 data points we collect. It's not black and white. Hey, if we don't see this, then it's bad, and if we do see this, then it's good. It can vary, and we have the ability behind the scenes to fine-tune things. But for the most part, like I mentioned, when we onboard a new customer, there's a 2-week observation period. I'm not calling it a learning period on purpose. We're not baselining anything. We're just doing it an observation period, after which point we can come back to the business and say, hey, this is what we would have blocked. Can we get your blessing on whether you expect this or not? So that use case would handle very old browsers, for example, that have challenges running JavaScript, which, let's be honest, if you can't run JavaScript today, the internet doesn't work for you. Everything needs it. But maybe there's monitoring tools that you are unaware of, or that you are aware of and you want to allow in. So we would work with you in a consultative manner in order to provide the greatest guarantee that we will have no false positives, effectively, very low false positives. False negatives certainly don't generally happen. I'm not aware of any cases where we should have flagged something and we didn't in a volumetric way. Certainly, we generally take a very conservative approach up front. We definitely respect the fact that your customer is the most important thing to you, and we don't want to provide an unwelcome experience. And to that end, we're not just dropping packets on the floor when we make a decision. We're providing you the same sort of experience to the end user as if they simply got the username or password wrong on a login page, for example. So we're not doing anything necessarily untoward. And again, that's why we have that learning mode or observation mode rather at the beginning.
Oh, perfect. And Thomas wants to know where he can get some of those shirts in the top
right. Funny story. My colleague found them on Amazon the other day, so he's going to order one for me. So just look it up. I think you could find some. Maybe we can put you in touch with it and send it out later.
Yeah, we are a little short on time, but I do have a question from my side as well, because again, going back to the point you mentioned about how the actors change behaviors. I'm interested to see what's coming next. Like, how are these bad actors improving their game? What do you see is coming down the pipeline at us as IT and security professionals?
Right. So what naturally happens is if you have something like Shape in place, that's eliminating the automation. What's now happening is they're pivoting to just conducting them manually, which is even scarier. Because now you need to have your fraud tool make sure that it's collecting human data as well. But you have to be careful that you don't spend too much time and effort trying to build profiles of individual users. Like, how would I interact with my bank account? Because that's where the fraud space has shifted. And at Shape, we view that to be perhaps not the smartest decision, because it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to profile individual accounts or individual users. Our approach is a little different in that we try and look with a wider lens and simply try and find the bad actors. Because they have ROI as well, they're going to be trying as many different accounts as they can from a small set of infrastructure, for example. So that's really where things are pivoting. They're pivoting to labor farms, basically, of humans conducting fraud or conducting this type of attack traffic against you without using automated tool sets. And that's really where things are getting.
That is scary. Yeah, that is scary. Well, we're out of time. We do have a 20-minute